Hi, this is Sanjay Sharma, and you are tuned to our very special conversation program called Sir, Let Me Tell You, where we invite students who are about to graduate or have recently graduated to impart and reflect on what they have learned and how they plan to apply in their lives, both personal as well as professional. This initiative stems from a startling realization. During a recent discussion with the students, I was pleasantly surprised to notice that they accumulated way more knowledge than I remember sharing during the class discussions. It was a real treat listening to them with their level of sophistication in articulating ideas, concepts, and theories. Frankly speaking, I felt so privileged witnessing their transformation as their teacher, mentor, or coach, and could not help but recall the Hindi verse. हर सुमन का सुरभि से यह अनलिखा अनुबंध पवन को सौंपे बिना यदि मैं झरूं सौगंध. Meaning, there is this unwritten contract between the flower and fragrance that the flower would not perish until it facilitates a smooth assimilation of fragrance with the wind so that it could achieve its purpose of existence or what it was meant to. For a teacher, nothing could be more delightful and rewarding than seeing motivated and diligent students come up with flying colors and excel in their fields of interest. All they need is a mentor who could assist them in figuring out a sense of direction and purpose of learning for their flourishing. This initiative is an effort to offer a platform where they can showcase their caliber and competence with confidence. Having taught in different parts of the world in different departments, I would be inviting students from political philosophy to international relations, Korean studies to Asian business management, legal studies to languages, and so on. If this is what resonates with you and you feel motivated to join us as guest students, let me hear from you. I hope you would love the program. Let's get started. Today, my guest student is Jagrati Chauhan. She's currently an undergrad student in her final year of political science honors. She's interested in getting to know about the world and different cultures. So, needless to say that international politics happens to be one of her favorite streams of learning. Let's see what she's going to share with us today. Welcome, Jagrati, to the show.
Thank you so much, sir.
What am I anticipating to hear from you today?
So, today I'm going to talk about Confucius and his philosophy and its impact in Asia Pacific region.
Confucius, wow. Actually, when I hear about, I don't know if we discussed this in the class too, but whenever I think of Confucius, I get this idea that most of the people have heard his name, but very few people actually know about him. Give us an overview of who Confucius was and what his philosophy was.
Sure, sir. So, talking about Confucius, if I had to give a short introduction of him, so it would be as follow. So, he was hailed after his death as an uncrowned king, a philosopher whose sound bites of wisdom, and it became China's handbook on government and its code of personal morality for thousands of years. But very little is known about Confucius, as you have said, and what is known about is full of contradiction and myth. So he is considered as China's first teacher. So there's this very famous quote of his which I absolutely love. He said that humans should have compassion, and with compassion he can win anything. And he was a humanist. That's why he is still liked in China. It's about ancient times when China was divided into many states fighting each other for power and to establish central authority of the state. At that time of war, violence, and instability, he came forward and amazed everyone with his thinking. So, the different humanists that I have studied or learnt about, they all have one thing in common, and that is compassion. So, this is the central idea which he also laid emphasis on. So, Sir Confucius is a Western name, and his original name was Kong Fuji. Confucius is a Latinized form of the Mandarin Chinese Kong Fuzi, where Fuzi stands for master, hence it is Master Kong. As I have said, he was called as first teacher of China. So, as he started teaching and enlightening, just as Buddha, it is thought that he was born on September 28th, uh, almost contemporary to Buddha, 551 before Christ. Now,
Mm.
now here's a very interesting story of his birth. It is a Chinese folklore which I would like to share with you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it starts like that. So the man who became the father of Confucius, he was called Kung the Tall because he was a tall man and also the ruler of his district. He had 9 daughters and he wanted a son. At the age of 60, he remarried to Yan Xingzai, who at
Mm.
that time was in her teens. So there was so much pressure on Yan Xingzai by society and her husband to deliver a son. So she used to ask the Almighty for a son. One night when she was asleep, she dreamt she was sitting alone in her garden in the dimness of the moonlight. She had a very surprising, or I can say a weird dream. She saw a little animal coming towards her. It wasn't a goat, nor was it a sheep or a dog. It was, no, she thought that could it really be a unicorn because it was a unicorn. So that unicorn offered her a jade in which something was carved. When she read it, it was written there that a son of great spirit to be born, and someday he shall rule the land of Chao as a good and wise king. However, this Chinese boy, a child of long ago, did not become a king. Instead, he taught other men how to rule their people wisely. So, all over the world, he is regarded as one of the wisest and greatest teacher who has ever lived. And so, it is very interesting to know that there is a similar story of Buddha also.
Yeah, yeah. I was just actually thinking
Yes,
about it.
sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
sir.
Go ahead.
It's
Go ahead.
like
Mm.
once Buddha's
Mm.
mother was sleeping and she dreamed that from the skies a
Mm.
beautiful white elephant was coming to earth, all the way down from Milky Way and lightening its path. So it came to her and entered in her womb. So I think
Mm.
ancient Asians were very fascinated by the thought of divine intervention somewhere. As I said, his father was 60 when he married his mother, Confucius'
Mm.
father,
Mm.
Yan Zhengzai. So, of course, he had to die first, and he died when Confucius was 3 years old. And he was raised by his mother in poverty. Later, he married and had 2 daughters and one son. So, coming to his education, I think this is something which interests me a lot. Education system or curriculum at that time was very rigorous, and I think till today it is highly competitive in China or in Korea or Japan.
Mm.
So, going back to ancient China, they had 6 arts in their curriculum, and each was compulsory, and each was very different from other. So, they had rites, music, archery, and horse riding, calligraphy, and mathematics. And Master Kong, our Confucius, being a phenomenal student, mastered all 6.
Mm.
After his education, he served the empire by working on different positions, first as magistrate, then assistant minister, later minister of justice. And at age 56, he realized that his superiors were uninterested in his policies and in his work. So he with his student went on exile. So he resigned from there. So for 12 years, it was a self-imposed exile. In this period, he wandered all over China. So there's a very fascinating thing about exiles in Eastern philosophy. Many of the renowned philosophers or sages of East, they often went on exile, and that exile period was something which further polished their thoughts. So they went into exile like a wandering monk, traveling the countryside and the distant parts, deep into the forest, sometimes covering mountains, valleys, and villages. Be it Buddha, Confucius, Mahavira, or Hindu god Rama, or Hindu sages, they went on exiles. And I think
Mm.
that somewhere connected them with nature and then to universe to an extraordinary level. Hence, they were called as enlightened also. However,
Mm.
coming back to Confucius, at age 62 he returned to Lu and spent his rest of life teaching his disciple and until he died at 71 or 72 of natural causes. So coming to next part of your question, it is philosophy.
Mm.
Although Confucianism is often followed in a religious manner by Chinese, but many argues that its values are secular and that it is therefore less than a religion than a secular morality. Confucianism discusses elements of the afterlife and views concerning heaven, but it is relatively unconcerned with some spiritual matters that is often considered essential to religious thoughts, such as the nature of souls and afterlife and things like that. However, Confucius is said to have believed in astrology, saying heaven sends down its good or evil symbol, and wise men act accordingly. He also talks about unity in individual, and according to him, you should cultivate yourself. And as per him, if you are able to find yourself, then all your enemy they will unite, and you can get heaven. And sir, if I have to summarize the Analect, his book
Mm.
collecting Confucius thoughts, then I can
Mhm.
cover it in five constant virtues that he
Mhm.
mostly talked about. First one, of course, it is compassion.
Mhm.
Uh, this I think is must-have property. People are becoming too much aggressive nowadays, and I don't know why. However, let me give you a good news. Confucius says that humans are fundamentally good. For instance, when we see little kids or children, so we find them adorable because they are full of innocence. So he says that no man is naturally or born evil, but circumstances and situation make people evil. So he also says that basic nature of human beings is good. So they can be improved, teased, groomed, and even perfected. So I think compassion is something that I would definitely realize in my personal life too. And second of the constant virtue is ritual property. He gives so much importance to ritual and traditions. However, modern Chinese they totally abandoned it. He says that a man who is not good, what can he have to be? What can he have to do with a ritual? So he emphasized it on a lot. So third of his virtue is justice. I would explain it with a quote of his. He
Mhm.
says that the gentleman holds justice to be of highest importance. So if you are a gentleman, then you should hold justice of highest importance. And also, if a gentleman has courage, but he neglects justice, then he becomes insurgent. If an inferior man has courage but neglects justice, he becomes a thief. Hence, justice is very
Mhm.
important for him. Fourth one is knowledge. So as per him, knowledge is the power. So if you are knowledgeable, then world will definitely at your feet. There is
Mhm.
a very interesting quote of Confucius on knowledge that goes
Mhm.
like, he says that he who knows that he knows not is a wise man, follow him. And he who knows not that he knows not is a fool, and shun him. It's like
Mhm.
a tongue twister though. It actually is a very deep message indeed.
This is also somewhat similar to what Socrates said, if you remember.
Yes, sir.
Socrates was considered the wisest of them all in the known world because he knew what he did not know,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You told
That
right.
awareness about it. Yeah, that's right. What else is there in that Analects?
Fifth virtue, that is integrity, that he talks
Mhm.
about in Analect. It is Confucius remarked, man's existence lies in his integrity. So a man without integrity can exist merely through his luck. So even he emphasized so much on respecting your elders and parents. So he
Mhm.
mourned for a whole 3 years after death of his mother, which is quite impractical and impossible today
Mhm.
to mourn
Mhm.
for such a long period, but he did. So,
Mhm.
and so Westerners, they often have that perception that Asians don't move out of their parents' house and they eat 3 meals, per day. How does that work? They live with their parents, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, now we know where it's coming from. It's coming from Confucius and his teachings. And in Hinduism also, we place parents next to God, and we give so much importance to family values. And
Mhm.
Master Kong also, asked his disciple to worship their parents. So if anyone who intentionally or unintentionally have hurt their parents, go and ask for forgiveness. Otherwise, Confucius would be behind you, and I'm not going to take any responsibility for that. So,
So that's what he explains in the term filial piety. Huh?
yes, sir.
If I hear you, all the nice things, nice virtues, huh?
Yes, sir.
Righteousness, integrity, wisdom,
Knowledge, justice.
knowledge, ritual propriety, love for parents, respect for parents. He also talks about the respect for superiors, right?
Yes, he talks. He gave so much emphasis on the hierarchy. So he
Huh.
said you have to respect the hierarchy and the social order. You can't disrespect the king, emperor, because they are sent by heavens, according to him, and
Hmm.
also to your teachers or your elder siblings and your friends, uh, those who are elder than you.
Right. So if I see that he is a contemporary of Buddha, huh?
Yes.
Obviously his stature is quite high. Is it only in China that his philosophy is treated with such importance, or it is also prevalent in other countries?
So it is prevalent in Asia Pacific region as a whole. So
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Asia Pacific region, which is
Mm-hmm.
affected by the philosophy of Confucius.
Mm-hmm.
So this region of Asia Pacific includes countries like China, of course, then
Mm-hmm.
Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Singapore, especially the Han Chinese community there living in Singapore, then
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam. So whether Confucianism is actually the religion or not, it is debatable since it doesn't have any priest or churches. Nevertheless, it has continued to affect the lives of Asian people to this day. So the system gives advices on how societies should be run, and how people should live their life, and how relationships should be maintained. It stresses hierarchy, social harmony, and group orientation and respect for elders, and all aspects of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean culture that are still very much alive. And so in Asian culture, people
Mm-hmm.
tend to respect hierarchy and status much more than Western people. So,
Mm-hmm.
who are generally more individualistic and not so strict about social order. But in Confucianism, you are supposed to behave according to your rank and keep the society harmonious, and not according to how you feel and how you would personally want to do. So the good of the whole society comes before an individual person. So, and embarrassing yourself or others is also avoided because it would break the harmony. And it
Mm-hmm.
explains why Asian people have sometimes difficulty saying no directly to your face. And so the way Confucianism is influencing the culture of these countries like China, Japan, and Korea. It can be seen in their education too, because the philosophy places great emphasis on schooling, and during the old times, good education was the only way to move up in the society. So the exams were notoriously difficult and consisted mostly of memorizing Confucian writings and classic works of literature. So as a result, great value is put on education even today, and the education system is highly competitive there. So don't be shocked if before the exam week you encounter Asian students living and sleeping in the library around the clock. So apart from that, there's this very famous saying that age is just a number. So,
Mm-hmm.
but for Asian people, age is just not a number. So, knowing
Mm-hmm.
who your elders are and how to treat them is very important to Asian people. Since since you should act respectfully towards people who are older or above you in the hierarchy. In Confucianism, respect towards elders was originally between father and son, but it has been extended to describe other relationships too, as you have said. So, such as a relationship between a ruler and a subject, a husband and a wife, elder and younger brother, and between friends too. So next time when the actions of a Chinese, Japanese, a Korean person leaves you scratching your head, so you have to remember the teaching of Confucius, and the behavior might not seem so strange anymore.
That's right. Yeah, no, because as you know, I spent a sizable part of my life in Korea. When they think about Confucian or Confucius values, they also connect it with the economic, social economic transformation of these countries. While listening to you, I was thinking that when you think about the traditions and then customs and respect for superiors and these hierarchies, where do women fit in according to him in the society?
Well, that's very interesting to know about women in Asian society, and how these philosophers, Eastern philosophers, they have impacted the uh, places of women in society. So Confucius himself did not say a lot about women, though what he said wasn't all that positive, of course.
Mm.
So later during the Tang dynasty, two female scholars they created a text based on his ideas, which became known as the Analect for Women. Basically, it enshrined the idea that the roles of man and woman should be highly separated, and the outer realm of politics, business, and realm of civic life, was for men, and the inner realm of caring for children and managing the home was for women. So this became deeply entrenched in Chinese society, and unfortunately, it lingers to this day. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they did a survey or a study, in 2012 that showed that only 9% of corporate management positions in Japan and South Korea they were held by women, compared with 43% in the United States. So this is demeaning for women, and a national problem too. So in an age where you want to make your economies as competitive as possible, so these societies are marginalizing a lot of their best talent.
During Mao Zedong,
Yes, sir.
Confucian was not given that much importance. Any idea why, and is it the same now, or there is a change in his status?
So the table has turned completely upside down,
Mhm.
starting from the history of modern China. So it would be interesting to trace the relationship of Chinese government and Confucianism. So in 20th century, when Communist Party of China they came to power, and they completely eradicated it from China. So leaders of that time, especially head of Communist Party of China, Mao Zedong, he criticized it much. He said that Confucianism is holding back China. For him, Chinese giving more emphasis on values, ethics, they were of no use. Instead, he wanted aggression to replace the old idea of compassion. He said that this kindness have sold us to the hands of foreigners or Westerners. Mao's Red Guard, they dubbed Confucius as the number one goon of goon, and they said that he was the number one hooligan old Kong. Uh,
Oh.
yes,
Mm.
but today Confucianism is being ardently embraced by the Communist Party of China. There are various reasons to that,
Mhm.
because the Communist Party has realized Confucianism might be useful for them again. But the version of Confucianism they use isn't the same as the old one, as given in the Analect. So Beijing is focusing more on the imperial Confucianism, or the imperial Confucius, who was all about obedience to the emperor, hierarchy, and loyalty. So
Mm.
it is a very modified version of Confucianism that they are using. Fast forward to today, the Communist Party they has overseen an incredible surge of wealth in China in the past 35 years, through old-fashioned capitalism. But the old Marxist rhetoric of the Mao years, it doesn't fit anymore. So they need a new ideology to justify their government, and they have come back to Confucianism for many of the same reasons as the old emperors did. It is a political, basically, Confucianism is a political tradition that is uniquely Chinese, and it can support their type of authoritarian rule. So, at the same time, it can be used to fend off all those awful ideas they don't want from West, like democracy and human rights. So, by reviving Confucianism, they are making the case that China has its own political culture based on its own political and philosophical history. So, China therefore doesn't have to head towards democracy in the way that Western advocates would like to see it happen. It can have a political future, based on what it sees as its philosophical past too. And talking about civilians, so civilians are very important here because they live in
Mhm.
China. So, so talking about Chinese civilians or ordinary people, then I think the communist regime somewhere created a void in their lives. It took away that spiritual or that philosophy from their life. So a void of spirituality or philosophy, it happened in their lives. And however, ordinary people they are returning to Confucianism in search
Mm.
of the spiritual nourishment they feel is missing in their lives. And now, so coming back to Chinese government, uh,
Mm.
they like using the word harmony and the harmonious society a lot. Concepts that Confucians also like to use. But what the communists mean by harmony is a society where there is no dissent of party rules. It's completely
Mm.
different what Confucius, from Confucian thinking.
Mm.
In Confucian thinking, it means something very different. Something So it's about a society where everyone fulfills their responsibility and creates a harmonious situation where the whole
Mm.
country prospers. What the Chinese government, the Chinese Communist Party is doing, they are taking a very narrowly defined, carefully selected version of Confucianism to
Mm.
push ideas they can think, they think can help convince the people that the system they are running is an extension of political system that China has always had. So, however, sir, I would like to call it a double paradox,
Mhm.
as if Confucius came today and saw Chinese government version of Confucianism, he wouldn't
Mm.
even identify it that it's his own teaching. And
Mhm.
another paradox is if Mao comes today and sees CPC or Communist Party of China, he also wouldn't be able to identify it as what he left behind because Mao
Yeah.
thrived on chaos. And today's
Mm.
political establishment is extremely conservative. Also, they are
Mm.
promoting Confucianism that Mao has abandoned. So, but sir, I would like to appreciate China because
Mm.
they don't let past hold them back, and
Mm.
they do what is best for their country, and they change and adapt according to time and requirement of today. So this is the reason why Chinese government wants to increase its soft power through Master Kong's philosophy. As sir,
Mm.
you must be aware of that they are setting up a Confucius institution across the globe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes, and they have been tremendously successful program for China too,
Mm.
where they teaches about Confucius and of course about Chinese culture. But sir, it is full of controversy. As When a Confucius Institute shows up at a university, the
Mhm.
university is effectively outsourcing its Chinese studies to the Chinese government. So
Mm.
it is said that they are spying also, but
Mm.
we don't know. So Confucius Institutes are funded by and to a certain extent overseen by an agency of the Chinese state. So in a way, a Confucius name is employed as a brand. So it's like a brand to China. And
Mm.
in academia, this is sometimes seen as an attempt by the Chinese government to control the discourse about China. Uh,
Mm.
so because of the controversies, there has been a distrust between the West and China.
Mm.
Because of that, so some very prominent universities in United States, like University of Chicago and Pennsylvania State University, they have
Mm.
dropped their relationship with Confucius Institute. And recently, Indian government have also taken action against these institutes. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
How is it in other countries? I mean, when you think about Japan or Korea or other places, do they also have a renewed version, or they have kept or retained that spirituality or a kind of like original feeling of harmony that you
Sir,
were talking about?
I would like to give an example, sir. For instance, you have been to Korea for a much longer period, and you have seen the culture so closely. Um, in Korean wedding, during wedding,
Hmm.
the groom and the bride have to take a bow.
Hmm.
They have to bow to their parents, and
Hmm.
so this is very much connected to Confucius teaching. This is because I would think that because of Confucius philosophy, um, the rituals and the customs, they have become what they are now.
Hmm.
And apart from that, sir, modern day South Korea, if we talk about South Korea, they do not want to identify themselves with Confucius. They do
Hmm.
not think that Confucius have played any important role in their development. Uh, they think that they have been modernized now because they have left his teaching behind. And so in South Korea, Confucianism has long been criticized, and
Hmm.
some South Koreans believe Confucianism it has not contributed to the modernization of South Korea. And for
Hmm.
example, sir, I remember an example. So, for example, a South Korean writer, Kim Kong Lee, he wrote an
Hmm.
essay entitled "Confucius Must Die for the Nation to Live."
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm. Was he the only person in this big, huge China, or there were many more philosophers like that? Because I'm just thinking there must be many more people, right?
Yes, sir, right, sir. So, sir, there are two other major philosophies in China, Buddhism and Taoism, or Taoism. So, Confucianism has coexisted with Buddhism, Taoism for over 2000 years harmoniously. So, now Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, they are considered the three pillars of ancient Chinese society. As philosophies and religions, they not only influence spirituality but also structure or government and science and arts. So, though their specific beliefs and teachings have occasionally been at odds with each other, there has been much room for overlapping. And so, there's a beautiful allegory depicting the difference and the relationship between these three philosophies, known as the parable of the vinegar taster. So, so basically, it's a traditional subject and subject in Chinese painting, the vinegar taster, and later spread to other East Asian countries too. So, however, this allegory is inclined towards Taoism a little bit, but tells us a lot about the difference between three major philosophy. The vinegar taster paintings, it shows three men surrounding a pot of vinegar. So each man representing one of the three prominent teachings of Chinese wisdom, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And the vinegar represents the essence of life. So each man has dipped his finger in the pot and tasted the vinegar, and they reacted by way of facial expression to the taste. So coming to the this allegory of vinegar taster, so the first man in the vinegar taster painting, so he is Confucius. Okay, so he shows a sour reaction to the vinegar. So Confucianism suggests that rituals create order and lead to the right result. So, a Confucianist holds ancestral culture heritage dear, and they long for the days in which the emperor was considered the son of heaven. So, for Confucius, modern life is sad because it has deviated from the rituals of the past, and the government of men has strayed from the government of the universe or the way of heaven. The second of the three vinegar taster is Buddha. He shows a bitter taste, bitter reaction to the vinegar. Buddhists believe that a being must rise above their earthly desires to attain a state of nirvana, and they contend that the modern world is full of traps and illusions that draws people in and lead to pain. So, the essence of life is bitter from society's obsession with the pursuit of personal satisfaction and subsequent suffering. The third and the last man, Lao Tzu, the author of the oldest book on Taoism, he shows a happy reaction to the vinegar. So, for Taoists, there is harmony between heaven and earth at all times. So, that is readily found by anyone at any moment. And Lao Tzu, now the relationship between these and how these philosophy interact with each other. So Lao Tzu sees Confucianism as laws run by men, which disrupts the natural laws of the heavens that mirror back to earth. So the more humans interference with the natural state of thing, the more distance created between humans and the harmony of the universe. Life becomes sour, when you try to manipulate nature and ignore the natural order of life, according to Lao Tzu. And Lao Tzu sees Buddhism as an unnecessary negative perspective of the world, no offense. Rather than providing traps that lead to pain, the world is full of opportunities for lessons that teach how to live in harmony. So life becomes bitter when greed and selfishness makes human resentful of each other and the natural offerings around them. That's what you learn from Taoism and from the three vinegar tasters. Uh, and what I learned from the three vinegar taster is that when you merely exist in the appreciation of what life offers, and are open to its lessons and are willing to adapt to whatever comes your way. So you are living a Taoist life, and the vinegar is only sour or bitter because if you choose to experience it that way through comparison or resentment, because the vinegar is simply what it is, and when you accept and appreciate that, the negative becomes sweet. So that's what the three vinegar tasters teaches us.
I think I was reading somewhere that Confucius was a student of Lao Tzu. I don't know if you have read that or not. He may have been, because not much is clear about it. He has written a book, Tao Te Ching. Huh? Have you heard that? Yeah. How do you critically appreciate Confucianism? What kind of values or philosophies seem to make sense to you, or uh, would you say you are influenced in what way? I mean, what? How do you see as a person interacting with this philosophy?
He said a lot of great things regarding all aspects of life, and most are in the form of dialogue between him and his students. Sometime he said things which are universal wisdoms, and some may need some historical background to understand. There are also some values which are up to interpretation, your interpretation. So what I have learned, so if I have to squeeze it on 5 points, so that would be a first thing that I learned from him would of course be compassion. Second would be kind to people, around you, and be kind to the world. Third would be to keep learning until the day you die, because it's all about your growth, because when you learn you grow. Fourth is be humble and learn from others. And the last but not the least, so it's my favorite, that wherever you go, go with all your heart. These are the things which I've learned from him. And I read that Analect, his book, and I would like to quote something from that book.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the Analect is uh, it's famous across the globe, and it's in the format of a question answer format, in which his disciple asks him questions and Master Kong replies to it. So, for instance, I would like to quote a few lines from the Analect. Zi Gong, which is who is a disciple of Master Kong, he asked what constituted the superior man, to which the Master Kong said, he acts before he speaks, and afterwards speaks according to actions. So here he is talking about integrity and keeping one's words. Another one is that Ji Lu, he is also a disciple. He asked about serving the spirits of the dead, to which Master replied, while you are not able to serve men, how can you serve their spirits? And then Zilu added, no, I venture to ask about that. To which Master replies again, that while you don't know life, how can you know death? And I think, sir, this is beautiful. These are the things that I learned from the Analects and the Confucius.
I think you have explained quite a lot in in such a short period of time about him, about his philosophy, and his views on family, life, society, and everything. Um, those who are listening to us, and I'm quite sure they would be also curious to know more about it. Can you suggest some books or references for the people who would like to learn a bit more about him, or learn or get to know him better?
Yes, sir. So, to learn about Confucius, you have a very wonderful book, The Analect. It's famous across the globe, and apart from The Analect, I would recommend documentary by the National Geographic. It is available on YouTube.
Good, Jagriti. I think today you have taken a very important topic and very nicely explained it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Jagrati. She is the final year student of undergrad program in political science honors, and she was talking about Confucianism and Confucius. If you have any questions, queries, let us know. If you are interested in joining us as a guest student, feel free to write to us. And we would be then meeting you in the next episode with a new topic, new theme. And Jagrati, I would like to thank you very much for taking time and telling all the nice things about, and in a very concrete, crisp, and concise manner. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.